non-combustible matter is left in the form of ash, which decreases the calorific value of the fuel. So, after burning the fuel, so what is left? You have seen that there is some non-combustible matter that cannot be combusted. So, that matter which is left after burning, that is known as ash. So, what is the desirable property of a fuel? That is, it should have low non-combustible matter content. Then it is moderate rate of combustion. The temperature of combustion of fuel depends upon the rate of combustion. If the rate of combustion is low, then required high temperature may not be reached soon. On the other hand, too high combustion rate causes the high temperature very quickly. So, what about the rate of combustion? The temperature which is attained during combustion, that depends upon the rate. If the rate of combustion is too low, then desired high temperature cannot be attained, and if the temperature which if the rate of combustion is very high, then it will cause a high temperature which is not desirable. So, what is desirable in a good fuel? That a good fuel should have moderate rate of combustion. Then the sixth characteristic which a fuel should have, that is minimum smoke and non-poisonous gases. On burning, the fuel should not give out objectionable and poisonous gases. In other words, the gaseous product should not pollute the atmosphere. The gases like carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, etc. are some of the harmful gases. So, the sixth characteristic which is desirable for a good fuel, that is it should produce minimum smoke during combustion, and the second which is desirable is it should not produce the poisonous gases during combustion. So, like the gases like carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, they are not good for health. So, these are considered as a harmful gases. So, a good fuel is that fuel which should not release the poisonous gases during combustion. So, one sixth characteristic which a good fuel should have, that is minimum smoke and non-poisonous gases. So, seventh characteristic which a fuel should have, that is it should be cheap. So, a good fuel should be cheap and readily available. So, one of the important characteristic of a fuel to be a good fuel is it should be a cheap fuel. It should not be costly, it should be affordable. So, that is also one of the important characteristic of a fuel. So, eighth characteristic which a fuel should have is a good fuel should be easy to handle and transport at low cost. So, one of the characteristic of a good fuel is it should be easy to handle, it should be transported from one place to another at very low cost and with safety. So, these are the characteristics of a fuel to be a good fuel. The next characteristic is controllable combustion. So, one of the important characteristic, that is the ninth characteristic of a good fuel, is its combustion rate should be controlled. The combustion of fuel should be easy to start or stop when required. So, this is one of the important characteristic of a good fuel, that combustion of fuel should not go out of control. This should be controllable. It should be such that it can be started or stopped when required. So, this is also one of the important characteristic. So, the next characteristic is non-spontaneous combustion. Spontaneous reactions are those reactions which can occur by itself. So, a good fuel is that fuel whose combustion should be non-spontaneous. It should not occur of itself. The combustion of a fuel should be non-spontaneous, otherwise it can cause fire hazards. So, these are some of the important characteristics of good fuel. Then this is the 11th characteristic is low storage cost. A good fuel should be easily stored at low cost. So, the storage cost should not be very high. So, this is also one of the important characteristic of a good fuel. So, let us discuss few multiple choice questions on the basis of this discussion. That is, the first is a good fuel should possess high ignition temperature, moderate ignition temperature, high calorific value. D is both B and C. So, what is the answer here? That is D, that is both B and C, that is moderate ignition temperature and high calorific value. So, a good fuel should have moderate ignition temperature. Ignition temperature is the lowest temperature to which it must be heated so that it burns smoothly. So, it should not be very low or it should not be very high, it should be moderate, and the calorific value is the amount of heat produced during combustion. So, a good fuel should have high calorific value. An example of primary fuel is wood charcoal, coke, natural gas and petrol. So, the answer is C, that is natural gas, because rest of the fuels, that is charcoal, coke and petrol, they are secondary fuels. Primary fuel is that fuel which are present in nature, and secondary fuels are those fuels which are derived from the primary fuel. So, what is the primary fuel here? That is only one. So, C option is the correct one, that is natural gas. The minimum temperature at which a substance ignites and burns without further addition of heat from outside is called. So, there are four options, that is ignition temperature, flash point, transition temperature and all the above. So, the correct option for this is A, that is ignition temperature. So, the minimum temperature at which a substance ignites and burns without further addition of heat from outside is known as ignition temperature. In a good fuel, the percentage of carbon is B, that is high. So, in good fuel, the percentage of carbon should be very high. Combustion of fuel involves chemical reaction between fuel and A option is hydrogen, B is nitrogen, C is oxygen and D is chlorine. So, what is combustion? Combustion is the exothermal oxidation of fuel, that is the burning of fuel in the presence of oxygen. So, the answer of this question is C, that is oxygen. So, the combustion of fuel involves the chemical reaction between fuel and oxygen. The reaction in which heat is absorbed is called, first option is exothermic, B option is endothermic, C is exergonic, and D is none of these. So, the reactions in which heat is absorbed is called endothermic reaction. So, the B option is correct. What is exothermic reaction? In which the heat is evolved. So, wherever the heat is absorbed, the reaction is known as endothermic reaction. So, the B option is the correct option. A fuel can be defined as a substance which produces heat by A option is combustion, B is reduction, C is none of these, and D is all of above. So, the option which is correct for this question is A, that is fuel can be defined as a substance which produces heat by combustion. The combustion reaction, that is given C plus O2 arrow CO2, that is carbon reacts with oxygen to form carbon dioxide. So, this reaction is, A option is exothermic reaction, B option is endothermic reaction, C option is autocatalytic, D is none of these. So, the option which is correct is A, that is it is a exothermic reaction. So, exothermic reactions I have already discussed. The exothermic reactions are those reactions in which heat is evolved. So, combustion reaction is a exothermic reaction, and when carbon is oxidized to carbon dioxide, this is a combustion reaction, and here the heat is evolved. So, this reaction is exothermic reaction. Which of the following constituent of fuel does not contribute to its calorific value? A is hydrogen, B is sulfur, C is nitrogen, and D is none of these. I have already discussed that the calorific value can be determined from the chemical composition of the fuel, and I have already discussed one of the formula, that is Dulong's formula, where the percentage of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen and sulfur, they are used to determine the calorific value of that fuel. So, the constituent or the element which does not contribute to the calorific value is C, that is nitrogen. So, the nitrogen does not contribute to the calorific value of the fuel. A good fuel should have following characteristics, that is moderate ignition temperature, A option is, B is high calorific value, C is low moisture content, D is all of these. So, what are the characteristics of a good fuel? One of the characteristic is it should have moderate ignition temperature, because ignition temperature is the lowest temperature to which it should be ignited so that the burning becomes smooth. So, the ignition temperature should not be very low or high, so moderate ignition temperature is desirable. So, A option is correct. High calorific value, what is calorific value? Calorific value is the amount of heat produced when unit mass of a fuel burns. Then what is desirable? High calorific value of the fuel is desirable. What is C option? That is the fuel should have low moisture content. So, a good fuel should have low moisture content. So, in this case, in this question, all the options are correct. So, what we will take here, that all of these. So, D is the correct option. So, I have discussed all the topics in this fuel, that I have discussed what is fuel, then I have discussed the combustion of fuel. So, then I have discussed the classification of fuel, then calorific value of the fuel, then I have discussed the characteristics of good fuel. Then I have revised this topic in terms of some multiple choice questions. So, I hope you enjoyed the session and try to understand all the topics. Thank you.